I'm Mike Farrington. Welcome back to the boardroom. In this video, I'm going to put the Farrington touch on a Rodgers Model 800 edge sander. Here's one of the key features I like about this tool. I don't know what it's called, but custom curved platens can be attached, and this is really neat. My plan is to set up an area that will help sand gentle curves. Sure, there's a little wear and tear, but I'm confident I can turn this couple $100 tool into something very serviceable. Let me say before we really get going that this is not a high-end tool. It's a very simple budget design, but it'll work for me. When I'm using an edge sander, it's either really light finish sanding, or I'm making a template, or just sanding some other little random thingy. So I don't need a ton of power or accuracy because I'm not really using it in a production capacity. Always fun to take something apart and see how it works, especially when the shop apprentice is hanging out with me. In this case, there were a few fairly well-made homebrew editions. The bearings in the idler pulley were a little crunchy, so step one is to take it apart and figure out what bearings I need. This one caught me off guard. Normally it only takes a few whacks with a hammer to get things like this apart. This one fought me to the bitter end. I totally should have switched up and used my press to get it apart, but then I got mad and felt the need to take it apart with a hammer on principle. This stupid thing wasn't going to tell me what to do. But in the end, I prevailed. So this was the bad bearing here. I noted the part number and ordered a couple new ones. Here are 3 tips I've found helpful when fixing up an old tool. First, I like these Scotch-Brite abrasive pads. I like the red color best. They're great at getting 40 years of gunk and crud off of anything. To that end, I wonder if they would work on my face. Second, I like to use a file to smooth out any dimples caused by set screws. Finally, a wire brush is great for cleaning threads. Both of these make reassembly much easier. This is the mount for the idler pulley. It allows the idler to move in and out so belts can be removed and replaced, and it allows the idler to tilt to adjust the tracking of the belt. I'm going to guess that the linkage is a homebrew repair, but it works great. This mount is designed to hold an adjustable table for sanding angles. I'm going to reinstall it but not use this feature. I'm just going to lock it in place. This surface and a few others had some paint glue and other indistinguishable fluids that have since dried. A piece of sandpaper and glass are a great way to clean and make sure the surface is still nice and flat. Here's a look at how the motor mounts. Bolts are bolted to the frame, then the motor goes on and it's kept in place with another set of washers and nuts. This is a common way to mount a motor in a tool. It's great because it allows for adjustability, but it can be a little frustrating. I used my 2 horsepower hacksaw to cut down the tracking adjuster knob. It was super long for some reason, and I rounded the bottom a little bit on the old grinder. Anytime I'm cutting a bolt or threaded rod, I make sure there's a nut threaded on there, so after the cut I can back it off and use it to clean the threads. The new bearings had been delivered, so I pull the bottom bearing off and prepare to install the new ones. Time for some bearing talk. These old bearings are known as shielded bearings. They have a metal shield between the inner and outer races, which helps prevent dust and detritus from getting into the bearing. These seem to do a good job, but dust always finds a way in and crunks up the bearing. I'm replacing these with sealed bearings. They have a rubber seal. Better at keeping dust out, but the question is, how long do the seals hold up for? I don't know, so I can't say with total confidence which is better. I'll post a review video in like 20 years. Oh yeah, and I found that my floor jack handle is the perfect diameter bearing driver. Time for some new surroundings. This is the garage on our house where I work on my motorcycles and stuff. This is known as an H-frame press, which I'll use to drive the new bearings in place. Step 1 is to get the bearings started. Step 2 is to use a pipe and drive it home. The idea is that the pipe makes contact with only the inner race so as to not damage the seal or the bearing innards. The fit between the outer race of the bearing and the pulley is a very light friction fit, so I just kind of gently tap it in place. The top bearing's the same deal, but I'm careful that it slides home evenly without getting caught. Alright, it's time to get serious about reassembly. Here's how the idler pivots to adjust the tracking of the belt. I bought some new bolts to hold this sucker in place. The old ones were a little cross-threaded. I also bought some new bolts for the linkage. I lubed up these pins with some dry lube. And I'll tell you what, dry lube seems like an oxymoron, but it works well enough and doesn't attract crud. Wind and a snowblower make for a cold face, and you either know what I'm talking about or you don't. Thank goodness I don't throw anything away. This cart used to hold my old drill press, which I got rid of a couple of years ago at this point. It's just been rolling around the shop ever since. I was getting ready to build a cart for the sander, and I looked over and wondered if the sander would fit on this cart. Lucky day it did. I did end up cutting 6 inches off the height, though. I used the old top as a template to help me get started on the new top. I cut out 2 pieces that look like this one. Then I continued cutting one of them to fit around some of the parts of the frame. This was to get the top to sit lower relative to where the belt will be running. Anything worth doing is worth overdoing, so I glued the 2 parts together with a vacuum bag. And I did this just to ensure that the finished top will be nice and flat. Maybe I'm just a simpleton, but for some reason every time I use the vacuum bag, I'm amazed at the results. It's a really neat way to sandwich parts together. With the top looking good, I turn my attention to this gentle curved platen. I'm not really sure what I want here, so I take my best guess and go for it. The neat thing is it's pretty easy to change in the future if I decide I need something different. I go way overboard with the pencil marks. I use the removal of the pencil marks as my depth stop. When the marks have been removed, go no further. After the curved platen, I quickly make up a new flat one to replace the old worn out one that the machine came with. I round over the edges to help prevent the graphite cloth from breaking. Installing the graphite cloth was a little tricky. It liked to crack unevenly. My first attempt was to use some sandpaper to help sort of bend it around the corner and crack it in the correct spot. This worked well enough. The second attempt, I used a block of wood to bend it around the corner, and this worked much better. I screwed it in place and gave it the old shake test. I'm happy to report it passed with flying colors. This is a center punch. I use it to mark screw locations for the curved platen. Next up, I drill the mounting holes in the table. I use the brackets as a guide. I recently came across this style of countersinker with just a single hole drilled through it. They work super good, 5 stars, high five, highly recommend. Once again, I use the old table as a template. I round over the corners because it looks cool, but also to protect my old man hips from bumping into a 90-degree edge. I throw down a couple of coats of thinned poly, my favorite finish for MDF. While the top is drying, I wanted to tune things up a little. It's best if the drums are aligned as best as possible. This isn't an easy task. The drums need to be aligned in terms of left-right twist, height, and then also parallel vertical alignment, if that makes sense. I use a level to give me an idea of what needs to be done. I then use the mounting bolts to shimmy an angle as needed. Next, I use a level and a straight edge like winding sticks to correct for twist. Time for dust collection. When this tool was made, dust collection was a broom and dustpan. Things have improved since then, and I wanted to make a single collection point that could be moved around the tool to the 3 different sanding areas. So I made this little wacky box thingy. It worked well enough stuck on the end of the tool. I thought that if I created a mounting point that pivoted, it would work for the curve sanding areas as well. So I made a mounting point for a T-nut, I guess it's called, and then drilled a corresponding hole in the collection box. I did the same to the end of the table. I drilled a couple holes to keep my options open. At this point, I was getting pretty excited. This felt pretty nice, and maybe this crazy plan would work out. So I moved the box up to the curve section, and I liked what I saw here as well. Fairly stable and reasonably adjustable. So let's take it for a test drive. The dust collection for the flat sanding area was pretty good. It was about as good as could be expected for this kind of a sander. And the new platen and graphite were doing their job nicely. Changeover takes 20 or 30 seconds, so that's pretty cool. Dust collection in this orientation is very good, and having this drum to touch up small curved pieces will be handy. Dust collection for the gentle curve area is not great, but it's good enough. I may change this in the future if it bothers me. Lastly, I built some storage for extra sanding belts. Pro tip, I like to use 4-inch PVC drain pipe that I've cut in half to hold up the belts so they don't develop a kink. So there it is, a refurbished and customized Rodgers Model 800 edge sander. This should prove to be a versatile sander for my shop. Hopefully you'll see this bad boy in many future videos. Alright, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. Till next time.